I'm AnewZ and you are watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Air India flight bound for London crashes on takeoff at Ahmedabad airport. At least 290 people killed. US withdraws certain staff from Middle East as tensions with Iran mount. The UN's nuclear watchdog finds Iran in breach of its non-proliferation obligations for the first time in 20 years. Thank you for tuning in. At least 290 people have been killed when an Air India flight to London carrying 242 people crashed into a building shortly after takeoff in Ahmedabad. According to local reports, a single survivor aboard the Boeing 787 was found and is in hospital.
An Air India passenger plane bound for London has crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad in western India, slamming into a residential building near the airport. According to city police, at least 290 people have been confirmed dead and one passenger survived the crash. Police say more than 50 injured people are currently being treated in hospitals and there could be additional survivors among them. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was carrying 242 people, including 11 children and 2 infants. Among the passengers were 169 Indians, 53 British nationals, 7 Portuguese and 1 Canadian. The plane went down just minutes after departure, crashing into a doctor's hostel at the BJ Medical College. Part of the aircraft landed on the dining area, and rescue workers say many medical students were caught inside. So far, more than 100 bodies have reportedly been recovered. The aircraft was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, one of the most modern long-haul jets, and this is the first fatal crash involving that model since it entered service in 2011. Authorities say the plane gave a mayday call shortly after takeoff, but then disappeared from radar. Moments later, it crashed into the hostel building. While the Dreamliner has had previous issues with engines and components, it has maintained a strong safety record. However, last year, a whistleblower in the US called for all 787s to be grounded, a claim Boeing rejected. Boeing says it is working with Indian authorities and gathering more information. Following the crash, its shares fell 5% in early trading. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the tragedy heartbreaking and said rescue efforts were being fully supported. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the images were devastating and confirmed that the UK was coordinating with Indian officials.
For the latest surrounding the crash in Ahmedabad, we go to New Delhi and our Neha Punia.
Emergency operations are continuing at the site of that crash in the city of Ahmedabad in western India, where that plane crashed on Thursday afternoon local time. Civil aviation authorities say that soon after the plane took off, it had issued a mayday signal, but when air traffic control teams tried to contact the aircraft after that, they were unsuccessful. We've seen now videos that have captured seemingly the final moments of that aircraft before it crashed. You can see how the plane really struggled to gain height. It reportedly only climbed about 600 feet before it wavered and then crashed into a densely populated neighborhood just adjacent to the Ahmedabad International Airport. It's here that the plane has hit what appears to be a residential building. Pictures that have been posted online by residents of that area show the tail of the plane sticking out of that building. You can see debris of the plane, including its wings, lying charred on the ground next to it. About 200 doctors in training were reportedly residing in that building. It's unclear how many of them were inside at the time of the crash. Relatives and family members and friends of the passengers who were on board all through Thursday were desperately trying to get more information. many of them queuing up outside the Ahmedabad airport, hoping that there would be more clarity. Hospitals in that area have been saying that the bodies that have been brought to them were charred beyond recognition. We have heard also from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He governed that region where the crash took place for several decades before he moved to New Delhi to become Prime Minister in 2014. He's expressed sadness and shock, saying that this is a tragedy that is heartbreaking beyond words. It's a sentiment that many Indians are sharing, as this is increasingly looking like it was one of the worst aviation disasters in Indian history. Neha Punia for AnewZ, New Delhi.
Over in the United States, protests over federal immigration raids and President Donald Trump's mobilization of the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles continue to spread across the country. Hundreds of arrests were made, but activists announced holding even larger demonstrations in the coming days.
Large crowds gathered again on Wednesday evening in downtown Los Angeles for a peaceful protest that later spilled into the city's streets. Carrying banners, posters and flags, demonstrators chanted slogans and listened to speeches before marching in unison through nearby streets.
Are you ready to stay in the streets? Yeah! I want to say to each and every one of you, you are not alone. The world is watching Los Angeles.
Wednesday marked the 6th consecutive day of protests in Los Angeles over President Donald Trump's immigration raids. While largely peaceful, some demonstrations have seen violence. Officials say the Marines and National Guard deployed at the city are tasked with protecting federal personnel and property during immigration and customs enforcement raids and related protests. Asked about reports of protests spreading to 17 other US cities, President Trump pushed back, focusing instead on the situation in Los Angeles.
I can tell you that what we have is a situation in Los Angeles that was caused by gross incompetence. They didn't have the police to handle it. The police were asking us to come in. They were very late. We had to go in to save a lot of ICE officers, as you know, who were held up. They were holed up in a building, and they were being attacked. And the military went in, the National Guard went in and got them. The police weren't able, unfortunately, to move fast enough, but we moved fast enough. And while we were there, we stayed there, and we stopped tremendous destruction and death.
Meanwhile, federal prosecutors in Los Angeles have filed criminal charges against 2 protesters accused of throwing Molotov cocktails during earlier demonstrations.
We are looking at hundreds of people. We have video, we have FBI collecting video, we are collecting body cam, we're collecting social media, we're collecting everything. And we're going to take our time, we're going to identify people. They think the mask is saving them, it's not saving them.
The demonstrations began on Friday in Los Angeles and have mostly remained peaceful, concentrated within a few downtown blocks. However, confrontations with law enforcement have grown increasingly tense since the military deployment. Trump has vowed to step up deportations and bolster ICE operations, setting a daily goal of 3,000 migrant arrests, a move critics say targets vulnerable communities and fuels public unrest.
As the protests in Los Angeles reach their 7th day, a court hearing is set for today on California governor's motion to limit how the Trump administration can use the Marines and National Guard deployed in the state. For the latest, we go live to Tony Waterman in LA. Tony, what's the situation like on the ground right now, and what are some of the latest political messages we've heard on the rallies?
Well, things are pretty quiet here outside of the Federal Detention Center, but this has been the normal flow of these demonstrations over the last couple of days. We see that during the day that there aren't a lot of people that come down here, but as the day progresses and we get into the afternoon, that tends to pick up. We get a lot of people coming out here protesting with the National Guard in the background. You mentioned that hearing, that's going to be taking place in just a couple of hours from now, and interestingly enough, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who was testifying up on Capitol Hill, was asked directly about this hearing, asked whether or not the Trump administration would abide by whatever this federal judge decides in this case, and he would not give a clear answer in that. So there is concern about what is going to happen on the ground here. We have 4,000 National Guard troops. There are 700 Marines who have been stationed about a half hour south of Los Angeles. But the command center is saying that they will be deployed in the city in the next 48 hours. And we are expecting that more of these protests will happen, not just today on Thursday, but really stretching into the weekend. And the president says that these troops that are on the ground are necessary to help quell that violence. Their role, though, is very, very limited, and he's now threatening to deploy troops to other cities across the United States as we see these protests popping up really from coast to coast. Many cities across the U.S. bracing for mass demonstrations to take place today as these immigration raids continue. They have been happening since the early days of the Trump administration, but it's the workplaces that are very much being targeted, at least in California at this point, as the administration tries to reach its 3,000 daily arrest goal. We're talking about farms, construction sites, restaurants, hotels as well. In a state like California, where 1 in 3 jobs is held by somebody who is not born in the United States. This is causing a lot of economic disruption, especially when it comes to farm workers, 42% of which, according to government data, do not have legal status. And it seems as if President Trump is waking up to the economic destruction that these increased raids and detentions could have. He posted on social media earlier today that he's going to do something for the farmers. What exactly that is, we don't know at this point, but these protests, these demonstrations are continuing, and they're expecting a lot of demonstrations heading into the weekend when President Trump is hosting a massive military parade in Washington, D.C. More than 1,800 demonstrations planned across the country on Saturday for that parade, which also happens to be the same day as the president's 79th birthday.
Thank you so much, Tony. And in other news from LA, a federal crackdown on transnational criminal organizations exposed an Armenian organized crime network tied to COVID loan fraud, violent power struggles, international theft rings, and attempted murder.
It started as a pandemic-era fraud. $30 million siphoned from emergency funds meant to keep American workers and businesses afloat. But investigators say the trail didn't end in spreadsheets. It led to a dark underworld of armored vehicles, hired killers, and mafia-style turf wars playing out in Los Angeles. In a sweeping pre-dawn operation, federal agents arrested 13 suspects, 12 of them Armenian-born, across multiple locations in LA. One suspect is still on the run. Seized during the raids, $100,000 in cash, 14 firearms, and 3 armored vehicles, the kind of haul that paints a picture far beyond financial fraud. At the center of it all is William McGrahan. Authorities allege he masterminded a sprawling COVID loan scam, using fake tax records and bogus bank statements to create phantom businesses. He applied for $47 million and secured nearly $30 million. Investigators say part of that money was funneled overseas, with some likely returning to bankroll organized crime in the US. The cash, federal affidavits claim, helped fuel a gang war erupting in California's San Fernando Valley, a bloody feud between 2 rival Armenian factions, the Artuni Enterprise and the Amirian Crew. What followed was a descent into violence rarely seen on American streets. Drive-by shootings from black SUVs, assassination attempts tracked by drones, even a home invasion murder carried out by a hitman in a clown mask. In one shootout, a gunman was killed after storming a house. The intended target fought back with a revolver. Prosecutors say the conflict is driven by 2 alleged kingpins, Ara Artuni and Robert Amirian. Both are accused of ordering killings, kidnappings, and torture in a brutal power grab that began after notorious mob boss Armen Khazarian was deported in 2017. The Artuni crew is also linked to a high-stakes cargo theft ring. Their method? Fake trucking firms that rerouted Amazon shipments, netting more than $83 million worth of goods, from electronics to household supplies. But it didn't stop there. Federal officials say both factions ran credit card bust-out schemes, laundered money through a global network, and wired funds across borders. It's a transnational crime machine with suspected links to the Russian mafia. US Attorney Bill Asaley delivered a sharp warning. Let today's enforcement action be a warning to criminals. Our communities are not playgrounds for violence and thuggery. 13 suspects now face a barrage of federal charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, weapons offences, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Prosecutors say the case is far from closed and more arrests are likely.
Donald Trump has said he's willing to extend the July 8th deadline he set for completing trade negotiations with the countries of the world before his higher tariffs take effect. His remarks come after a trade agreement between the US and China was reached during trade talks in London.
United States President Donald Trump has expressed satisfaction over the trade agreement reached with China. This comes as officials from both countries met in London earlier in the week, as both sides seek to de-escalate trade tensions. The talks focused on critical economic issues, including US access to Chinese rare earth minerals and magnets, and China's access to US technology. The US president has also indicated that he would be willing to extend an 8th of July deadline for completing trade talks with countries before higher US tariffs take effect, citing progress in negotiations with some 15 countries.
Would you be willing to extend the deadline for trade talks with these countries?
I would, but I don't think we're going to have that necessity. We made a great deal with China. We're very happy with it. We have everything we need, and we're going to do very well with it, and hopefully they are too. But we're dealing with Japan, we're dealing with South Korea, we're dealing with a lot of them. We're dealing with about 15 countries, but as you know, we have about 150 plus. And you can't do that. So we're going to be sending letters out in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, to countries, telling them what the deal is, like I did with EU.
Meanwhile, Germany has welcomed the China-US agreement and hopes negotiations between the United States and the European Union can progress in a similar way.
I expressly welcome it. This is not at the expense of Europe. Rather, it is another conflict that has been resolved. I expressly welcome that. And I very much hope that we will also succeed in reducing and, if possible, eliminating the trade conflicts with the Americans in a similar way.
The US and China have been engaged in an economic standoff after Trump announced sweeping tariffs on imports from a number of countries earlier this year, with China being the hardest hit. The Asian country responded with retaliatory levies. The proposal from the London talks still needs the approval from both leaders before it can be implemented.
The US has launched a review of its multi-billion-dollar submarine deal with the United Kingdom and Australia, saying the security pact must fit its America First agenda.
The Trump administration has launched a formal review of AUKUS, the landmark defence pact with the UK and Australia, raising fresh doubts over America's commitment to its key allies. Signed in 2021, the £176 billion deal, or $238 billion deal, would see Australia acquire 3 nuclear-powered submarines from 2032. The country was scheduled to make a $2 billion payment in 2025 to the US to help boost its submarine shipyards. Australia's Defence Minister says reviews are expected with new governments and insists the plan remains on track.
This is a pretty normal and natural step that the American administration are taking. It's utterly consistent with what we did as a new government, what the Starmer government did as a new government. It's what governments do, and I think we'll do in the future. I mean, this is a multi-decade program where governments, in fact, are going to come and go. And when new governments come into place, I think you will see them undertake reviews of this kind, and that's fine. We will work very closely with the US on it, but we're really confident about the progress of AUKUS, and we're confident about how it will proceed under the Trump administration.
Speaking alongside Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth praised the solid ties between the two countries.
as strong and robust as it's ever been, and is important considering the issues we face in the region and the world. So, beautiful.
The move comes as both Australia and the UK face pressure from the White House to lift military spending. Doubts are arising over whether the US can live up to its AUKUS promises amid internal challenges to its own military production. With growing global tensions, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer declared a week ago a shift toward warfighting readiness, stressing that deterring hostile states requires visible strength and preparedness. China has criticised the pact as fueling an arms race, but for Australia it's a record defence investment and a sign that long-range deterrence is now essential in the Indo-Pacific.
European foreign ministers said they were ready to step up pressure on Russia, including further sanctions involving the energy and banking sector, to weaken Moscow in its war with Ukraine. Foreign policy chiefs of France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, Britain and the European Union adopted the statement in Rome, where they were joined by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the Ukrainian representative. Following the talks of the Weimar Plus format, Rutte said Europe needs to ramp up defense spending.
Because we need to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible position to, one, maintain the ongoing conflict with Russia, the unprovoked Russian aggression against Ukraine, but also to be in the best possible position when a long-term ceasefire / a peace deal arises, to make sure that Putin will never ever try this.
The number of Russian troops killed or wounded in Ukraine has topped 1 million, according to military officials in Kyiv. The claim by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces is in line with Western intelligence estimates. The UK Defense Ministry also said in a statement that Russia has suffered over 1 million casualties, including roughly 250,000 killed, since it launched the full-scale invasion in February of 2022. Earlier this year, the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces claimed that Ukrainian military losses had topped 1 million. Ukraine's Kharkiv was once again struck by Russian drones overnight, injuring 17 people, including at least 4 children.
Russian drones attacked Kharkiv overnight, injuring at least 17 people, including 4 children. The city mayor says there were 11 strikes which hit the city, with a 12th that didn't detonate.
Kharkiv is under attack yet again. These were Shahed drones. 12 drones hit 3 districts. Fortunately, one of the Shaheds did not explode. We have serious damages of residential buildings.
Residential areas, educational institutions, kindergartens and infrastructure were hit by shelling. Dozens of cars were damaged, windows in schools and houses were broken.
Our dog is very sensitive to explosions. When the shooting started, the dog woke us up. We heard an incoming hum, then there was an explosion. Everything started falling down and there was a fire outside.
This follows the previous night's 9-minute assault that killed 3 people and injured more than 60 others. The drones targeted residential neighbourhoods, damaging homes, schools and vehicles and sparking fires. Ukrainian officials condemned the attacks as deliberate targeting of civilians and called on the international community to increase pressure on Russia to stop the violence. Previously, Moscow has always denied targeting civilians.
Washington is reportedly set to evacuate non-essential U.S. embassy staff and their dependents from Baghdad. The U.S. State Department also restricted government staff travel within Israel. The moves come amid fears of a wider conflict in the Middle East involving Israel and Iran, as Washington and Tehran are planning to hold their 6th round of nuclear talks this Sunday.
The United States is preparing a partial evacuation of its embassy in Iraq and allowing military dependents to leave several locations in the Middle East due to heightened security risks, according to US and Iraqi sources. The move comes amid heightened fears of a broader conflict involving Iran, Israel and their respective allies. US President Donald Trump confirmed Wednesday that US personnel are being relocated from the region, which he described as potentially dangerous, and reiterated Washington's firm stance against Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. The State Department has initiated a drawdown of staff at the US Embassy in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, authorizing the departure of all non-essential personnel. In an updated travel advisory, the department cited heightened regional tensions as the reason for the decision. The evacuations come as the region remains volatile after 18 months of war in Gaza, fueling fears of a broader conflict involving the US, Israel and Iran. The geopolitical uncertainty has rattled global markets, with oil prices surging more than 4% following this news.
The United Nations Nuclear Watchdog's Board of Governors has found Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations for the first time in 20 years. The resolution urging Iran to explain uranium found at undeclared sites was passed with 19 votes in favor, 3 against and 11 abstentions. Western officials say the uranium may be from a secret nuclear weapons program ended in 2003. Iran strongly reacted to the resolution, announcing the launch of a new uranium enrichment site and an upgrade to existing facilities. Turashir Alilu brings more from Tehran.
Iran's foreign ministry and the Nuclear Energy Organization, in a joint statement issued immediately after adoption of the IAEA resolution, said orders were issued to launch a new enrichment center at a secure location and to replace the first-generation centrifuge machines of Fordow Enrichment Center with advanced sixth-generation machines. Saying that Iran had no choice but to respond to the political resolution, the statement said other measures are also being planned and will be announced later. The UN Nuclear Watchdog's 35-nation Board of Governors, in a closed-door meeting on Thursday, passed a resolution declaring Iran in breach of its non-proliferation obligations. The resolution was proposed by the United States and the European Troika of Germany, France, and the UK. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is in Norway to take part in the Oslo Forum, had warned in an X message of the strategic mistake of the European Troika, vowing a strong reaction if the resolution was passed. It remains to be seen whether today's vote will negatively affect the upcoming Iran-US indirect nuclear talks, scheduled for this weekend in the Omani capital, Muscat. Tehran is expected to relay its alternative proposal to Washington about nuclear enrichment and lifting of U.S. sanctions in the upcoming talks on Sunday. Turashir Alilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
On the latest tensions in the Middle East, we're talking with Casey Babb, Senior Fellow with the MacDonald Laurier Institute, coming to us from Ottawa. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Today, several U.S. outlets carrying the report that Israel is considering military action against Iran without U.S. support in the coming days. That comes as the U.S. authorizes evacuation of certain personnel in Iraq. The news broke ahead of the presumed sixth round of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Now, when we look back last month, Trump had said he warned Netanyahu against striking Iran as he deemed a nuclear deal close. Do you believe enough has changed since then to warrant a solo Israeli action against Iran?
That's an excellent question. It's a hard one to answer. What it seems like right now is that, both of these leaders, in fact, all three leaders in Iran, Bibi in Israel, and President Trump in the U.S., are trying to signal, they're trying to compel other parties involved to do what they want. Interestingly, Netanyahu, who seems as committed as ever to striking Iran and to crippling their nuclear program, his actions, his aggressive nature in this space could ironically be what leads to the U.S. and in Iran and other parties coming to some sort of agreement. Right now, my sense is that you're not going to see a unilateral strike from Jerusalem on Iran. I think it's too early to say that, but it obviously, this is as tense as I think it's ever been. But there's still a lot of time and a lot of things that can happen here in the next few days.
Tehran's nuclear agency said today its third enrichment site is ready in response to the declaration censoring it in Vienna for breaching its non-proliferation obligations. How much would you say does this escalation complicate things further for the nuclear diplomacy Washington is engaging in with Tehran?
Well, along the lines of what I had just said, my sense of that is Iran is saying, hey, we better reach an agreement or else. We're ready to ramp up on enrichment activities. We're ready to do exactly what you don't want us to do. So you better come to the negotiating table and meet us halfway. That's how I read that. I read that the same way that I read the U.S. withdrawing certain personnel from the region. Okay, we're sending a signal that you should meet us halfway. Get in line. I think right now you're seeing a sort of dance between Jerusalem, D.C., and Tehran. Now, what we want to avoid is an all-out war. But like I said, I think there's enough time here. All it takes is one conversation, one person to come to the table and say, okay, I'm ready to do this, and we'll avoid that situation.
When it comes to meeting halfway, Tehran is set to present its counter-proposal at the next round of nuclear talks if they happen this week in Oman. Now, when we look back to the original nuclear deal Tehran and the world powers struck in 2015 that U.S. withdrew from during Trump's first term, what kind of a deal would you say can be made here if Iran doesn't accept the American demand of fully ending its uranium enrichment? Would you say there's any wiggle room?
Look, to be honest, I don't think it would be wise to give Iran much wiggle room. I think the Americans would say that. President Trump has been very clear that they will not stand by and allow Iran to acquire the nuclear bomb. The Saudi has said this as well. MBS has essentially echoed this. And of course, the Israelis. So an agreement of any sort, I think it would have to be clear that a nuclear program with the potential to be weaponized is off the table. At a minimum, it needs to be some sort of agreement that gives involved parties enough time to come up with something better, while simultaneously slowing Iran's activities. If you can't get them to agree to stop fully, but you're committed to a diplomatic solution, that solution has to lead to them winding down their activities and giving involved parties more time to hopefully get them there.
Casey, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
A large fire broke out at a port in Iran's Hormozgan province, engulfing 10 commercial ships. Emergency teams and firefighting units from other provinces rushed in to help and control the blaze. Officials said all available resources were used to stop the fire and keep it from spreading. The investigation on the cause of the fire is underway. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry expressed condolences regarding the plane crash in India's Ahmedabad. In a statement shared on social media, the ministry extended condolences to the families of the victims and wished them strength and healing. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said Warsaw is lobbying among EU countries to suspend or restrict visa-free travel for Georgia, citing democratic backsliding and migration concerns. The comments were slammed by Tbilisi as blackmail. Our Nini Nikolashvili has the details.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has issued a stark warning to Georgia. A visa-free travel to the EU could be suspended. Addressing the Polish Sejm, Tusk said that his government is working with another EU member states to gather support for limiting or halting visa-free access for Georgian citizens. The reason? A perceived drift away from the European democratic standards. Yes, that is my goal, he stated, accusing Georgia of no longer aligning with European stance against authoritarian rule. He added, I apologize if this offends anyone, but black and white loyalty to European values matters. The response from Tbilisi was immediate and furious. This is blackmail, said Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze to the reporters. Threats like these are sad and regrettable. Kobakhidze said that Georgian people can't be punished simply because some don't like their democratic choice. He insisted that Georgia remains committed to peace, development and European integration and warned that foreign pressure won't change the country's course. The blackmail has been used for years, he said. It has not worked and it won't work now. The EU has granted Georgian citizens with visa-free access in 2017, a move widely celebrated at this time. For now, this hard-won achievement could hang in the balance as tensions rise between Warsaw, Brussels and Tbilisi over Georgia's democratic future. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, AnewZ.
Turkmenistan has strongly criticized the United States' decision to impose a partial travel ban on its citizens, calling it a source of extreme misunderstanding and concern. The U.S. cited high visa overstay rates by citizens from the country. Ashgabat, however, says the move is unjustified. Turkmenistan's foreign ministry described the decision as hasty and warned it could undermine Turkmen-American cooperation, particularly as Washington seeks to expand trade via the Middle Corridor. Astana is set to host a regional energy forum along with the Central Asia-China Summit on Monday and Tuesday. According to organizers, more than 20 strategic cooperation agreements are expected to be signed, aimed at creating a base for joint investments in the industrial, scientific, and educational sectors. Kazakhstan hosted the 14th plenary session of the Parliamentary Assembly of Turkic States. The session was chaired by Azerbaijan.
The 14th General Assembly of Turkpa convened under the chairmanship of Azerbaijan's Parliament Speaker Sahiba Gafarova, with Kazakhstan hosting the session and assuming the rotating presidency. In his speech, Turkish Grand National Assembly Speaker Numan Kurtulmuş framed the gathering within a changing global order.
The bipolar world order has already faded into history, and the unipolar system, despite all its claims, has proven unsustainable.
Kurtulmuş said the emerging multipolar structure made cooperation among Turkic states more vital than ever.
If we want to revive our civilizational march, which has been slowed down or paused for various reasons, we must walk together toward common goals, without leaving a single member of our extended family behind.
Calling the Turkic world a rising strategic force, Kurtulmuş highlighted the region's population and geopolitical leverage. He also voiced support for broadening Turkpa's membership.
We sincerely wish for Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan to join as full members as soon as possible. And we believe that the active participation of observer members like Hungary and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus will further strengthen our unity.
The Turkish speaker described Turkpa as not just a parliamentary body, but a political engine for integration and peace. Following the session, the rotating chairmanship officially passed from Azerbaijan to Kazakhstan, while the Secretary General post was transferred from Turkey to Azerbaijan.
At the session of the Parliamentary Assembly of Turkic States in Astana, Azerbaijani diplomat Ramil Hassan was elected its new Secretary General. Hassan will officially take office for the second time on October 15th, having previously held the position from 2013 to 2019. Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov has approved the 2030 National Development Program. The strategy aims to bring the GDP to at least $30 billion, increase the per capita GDP to $4,500, and ensure an annual economy growth rate of 8%. Priority areas listed are industrialization, green energy, regional connectivity, and sustainable tourism. Central Asia is on the brink of a climate crisis, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Newly released reports indicate the region as one of the most at risk on the planet.
3 new reports from the World Meteorological Organization warn of a serious climate threat to Central Asia. Record heat, melting glaciers, and worsening droughts are putting the region's water, food, and energy security at risk. From 2025 to 2029, every year is expected to be hotter than recent averages, with a strong chance that global temperatures could briefly exceed the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit. Climate extremes like dust storms, landslides, and intense heat are increasing across the region, while infrastructure to capture and store water remains insufficient. A major concern is the rapid melting of the Pamir glaciers, which feed the Amu Darya and Vaksh rivers, vital water sources for millions. In Tajikistan, earlier snowmelt causes spring floods followed by dry summers, putting both water supply and hydropower at risk. The country relies on hydropower for over 90% of its electricity. Experts stress the urgent need for a coordinated regional response, especially for managing the Amu Darya and Sir Darya river basins through shared data and joint planning. The question now is whether Central Asia can unite in time to secure its future.
Kazakhstan plans to turn the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the world's largest operational spaceport, into a major tourist destination. The site, currently leased by Russia until 2050, could soon welcome thousands of visitors annually under a new tourism initiative. Our Fariza Kalimurzina has all the details.
The historic Baikonur Cosmodrome, known as the launch pad of the first human into space, is taking on a new mission: tourism. Kazakhstan's national tourism company Kazakh Tourism presented a draft concept to develop the spaceport into a multifaceted tourist hub. The project aims to transform Baikonur into a center for event-based scientific, industrial, and educational tourism. A key part of the initiative includes launching regular guided tours even during non-launch periods, aiming to transform the site from a niche destination into a vibrant, year-round attraction. Currently, interest spikes only during rocket launches around 10 times a year, drawing about 2,000 tourists per event, or roughly 20,000 annually. However, Kazakh Tourism estimates that with upgraded infrastructure and new attractions, Baikonur could attract up to 250,000 tourists each year. In addition to tourism routes and international marketing, the plan also involves reimagining the spaceport's museums and promoting the Baikonur brand abroad. Officials also expect the development to spark private investment in the region. So far, low occupancy outside of launch periods has discouraged hotel and service sector growth. But a consistent flow of visitors could change that. While located on Kazakh soil, the city Cosmodrome and surrounding territory have been leased to Russia since 1994 under a long-term agreement running until 2050. Russia pays Kazakhstan approximately $200 million annually for use of this site. Despite the arrangement, Kazakh authorities see a unique opportunity to open Baikonur more broadly to the world. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for tuning in and stay tuned to AnewZ.